welcome to Twin Talk. This is Joy, and I'm here with my sister Angie. Today we will be discussing the book Mark Twain, A Life by Ron Powers. But before we get into the book, I think it's worth sharing a little bit of background on the author.
Ron Powers actually grew up in Hannibal, Missouri, the same town where Mark Twain spent his childhood.
So I think that's really cool that they grew up in the same town. So Twain wasn't just like this historical figure to him. He was literally a part of the place where Powers grew up.
And that's probably why he was so interested in writing about him. I think it's because he wanted to understand not just Twain's life, but also what Twain represented in American culture.
Okay, so a little more about Ron Powers. He's a journalist and historian. He's known for writing really detailed and emotional nonfiction. He's written for major publications like the New York Times and Time Magazine. So he has a strong background in storytelling and research. And something else that's kind of cool about him is he has won a Pulitzer and he's won a Grammy. He's done some work in TV. And he's led a very interesting life.
Wow, that's pretty cool to win both of those.
Yeah.
So he's also written several well-known books, including Flags of Our Fathers, which I think that kind of sounded interesting, which he co-wrote, and No One Cares About Crazy People. Love that title.
I do too, and I'm not going to go off on this too long, but he's had some mental illness in his family, and there's been some tragedy in his family, and I watched an interview with him. I think it was on NPR. I like that Fresh Air with Terry Gross or one of those top shows, and he really gets into our mental health care system in America, and he makes some very good, valid points. So I do think I might try to read that book.
Yeah, No One Cares About Crazy People. I mean, just the title caught me right the first time I saw it.
Yeah. So I think what makes him stand out is, he's not just someone who focuses on facts. It's not like dry biographies. He really tries to, like with Twain, he tried to get behind what his life was like so he could understand what were his struggles, what were his emotions, what about his life led into his writing.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that in Mark Twain, A Life, because Twain comes across as a real person and not just a boring, stodgy, historical person.
Yes, and this book really changed how I see Mark Twain because, like most people, I just saw him as this funny writer. But it's a lot deeper, and honestly, I feel like a lot of his humor comes from so much of the tragedy that happened in his life.
Yeah. Okay, so first let's talk about his early life. So, as most people know, well, I say most people, Mark Twain's real name was Samuel Clemens, and he grew up in Missouri along the Mississippi River.
And, of course, we know that river became so important in his life and writing, and we already know that he worked as a riverboat pilot before becoming a writer, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and for those of you who listen to Twin Talk, we've already done Huckleberry Finn, and we mentioned this before, but I think it's worth repeating. Mark Twain actually is a river term, meaning the water is deep enough for safe navigation.
And I do think some of the most interesting stories in this biography do come talking about when he was a riverboat pilot, and unfortunately he did lose his brother, and it was in a riverboat accident. And that's just a whole different story, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's cool how his childhood influenced his stories later on. You can really see his childhood come through in Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Were you aware that the boys on Jackson's Island and Tom Sawyer and the bug in the church and the dog in the church and they thought they had drowned, and that these all really happened in his childhood? And I just think that's so cool that he got to retell some of his most precious childhood memories when he wrote these fictional books.
Yeah, that is actually really cool. And speaking of those books, Twain became really, really famous because of them.
Yes, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. So apparently they are what made him a household name.
People just love his humor. I love his humor. But it wasn't just his jokes. He used satire to criticize society.
To me, one of the really cool parts of the book is how it explained what was popular at the time, what type of literature, what was acceptable at the time. I didn't know this, but it was all very formal, and you just didn't say certain things. And here he comes as kind of this wild card from the South, from Missouri. And the way he wrote was kind of considered, I guess, blunt and unrefined for the time.
So he was definitely a rebel.
Yes, he was a rebel. So people were like, oh, well, what's this? The book talks a lot about Bret Hart and some of the other contemporaries during his time, how they just broke the mold of this elegant, refined, snobby European style. And people all over the world want to know, what's America like? You know, when he did like the jumping frog and
So he
Tom
basically
Sawyer.
broke etiquette.
Yes, he broke etiquette, broke the mold, and people embraced it and loved it. And so people thought he was rough and coarse, but it was popular, and he sold a lot of books that way. He made people laugh, but he also made them think. So it wasn't just coarse humor or trying to break the mold, but it also was, there was a lot deeper stuff in there. He had a lot of commentary on different things of society in these books, and that's probably, I'm guessing, why his work is still studied today.
Yeah, and I guess we're going to have to talk about his personal struggles. And have you noticed that's kind of a common theme through authors?
It does seem like
a lot of these authors, they have wild success, but then on the other end of the spectrum, they all have their personal struggles, and he was no exception to this.
he suffered more than most.
Yeah, and this was honestly one of the most surprising parts of the book for me.
Yeah, so he went through a lot. His dad was a very honest man, and his dad would give loans to people. He'd run a general store in good faith that they would pay back. You know, he would let people buy stuff on credit, on good faith that they would pay it back, and a lot of times they didn't. And but if he owed somebody money, they said he would work morning till night to make sure he paid back his debt, but other people didn't do him that favor.
You're talking about his dad?
I'm talking about his dad.
Yeah.
So that's why his dad had to declare bankruptcy. So his dad was super honest, but he paid a high price for it. But I think it did rub off on Mark Twain that, you know, that you need to be honest in business dealings. And Mark Twain, same deal with him. Now, let me say this. I feel like Mark Twain was not very good with his money. He liked to spend it, okay? And he liked to be very extravagant with his money, but he got himself in a bind, and he had to go on a worldwide lecture tour just to pay off all of his debts.
Yeah, and his personal life was really sad, too. He lost several family members, including his wife and his kids.
Yeah, and that is really sad how it does go. The book does take you through each personal loss and how he handled it, and that's interesting. So Ron Powers really emphasizes how these losses affected Twain emotionally, and it makes you look at his literature a different way. As you're reading through anything that talks about death or suffering, I kind of see it through a new light now. I'm like, oh, I'm seeing it through his pain now, and not just through his, like, it's fiction, you know.
So, I'm trying to remember, had he lost his wife and kids before he wrote Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn?
That is a great question, because it's been a little while since I've listened to the book. But there were so many deaths, I can't keep up with what was written when.
Wouldn't it not be interesting to know, like, when he wrote certain stories or cerern books, like who he had lost at the time? And I think you could read more into the passages knowing who he had lost.
For sure.
Yeah.
If I had you're right. And the book does set up a great timeline. You know, when he wrote what and who died and when he got married and all that stuff. But it's so much. There's so much information. It's hard to keep it all straight.
So we've definitely established that he was using humor to cope with a lot of his pain.
Yes,
and
for sure.
I do think that so many of our great writers, it's really sad, but it's because they've experienced so much pain that they are able to write such great literature, because they pull from a really deep place.
Right. Another thing I found really interesting was his views on society.
Yeah, you know, he spoke a lot about racism. He talked about politics. He talked about human nature. There really wasn't a lot he didn't touch on.
And even though he lived back in the 1800s, you know, some of the ideas still feel relevant today.
Oh, absolutely. You know, his criticism of hypocrisy, that's what I love about his writing is, you know, you'll just be reading through something and you don't even realize it till you've read a passage that he was brilliant in describing the hypocrisy of a situation.
Right. And what's so ironic to me, Huckleberry Finn was on the banned list, a book from libraries for a long time.
Yeah.
I think it was like in the 50s, because of the N-word and and there were some racial stereotypes.
Yeah.
But the whole book was about him choosing the right moral choice of supporting a slave.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, the whole book was about him doing the right thing, yet the book was banned. And he's been called a racist.
Yeah,
and
which is crazy.
It's crazy.
So people can't see beyond that he's using
some of the language.
Yeah, the language, but he was portraying the language of the time. But they're missing the forest for the trees.
Yes,
because his whole purpose was to show how slavery was wrong.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's what blows my mind.
So some of the things he wrote, it does kind of make him sound racist, but then there's a lot of stuff in the book that shows how he loved black people and how he had a lady that practically raised him who he just mourned her death, you know, and how he always took up for the underdog, the disabled, anybody that was the underdog, he was for them and he took up for them. So I thought that was cool. So back to Ron Powers. Like I said, I just really loved how he wrote the book. I loved how he didn't sugarcoat anything. He showed all of Twain's flaws, struggles, and contradictions. He didn't just show one side of Twain. He showed the good, the bad, and the ugly, but really there was a lot of bad, but there was also a lot of good.
Yeah, which it actually made me respect Twain more because he felt more human to me.
Yeah, and it shows him like as a person, not just some legendary figure that you can't really know.
You can't relate to.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me, what was your favorite part of the book?
For me, my favorite part of the book was just once you know his real, true life and the stories there, and you're going, oh, that's why he wrote that in Tom Sawyer, or that's why he wrote that in Huckleberry Finn, because that really happened to him, or he saw it happen.
So would you recommend people read this book first if they've never read any of his other books?
Definitely. I think... Oh, you mean the
book we're talking about?
Okay, his biography. For sure. If you're interested in Mark Twain at all, this is a super in-depth book. It's going to tell you from before his birth on, and it's going to tell you all kinds of stories you've never heard of. It has all kinds of documented stuff in there. It's super interesting if you're a fan of Mark Twain.
Yeah.
I forgot to do a rating for the book, and we've already done how many Mark Twains, right?
I can't remember. I don't remember what we did
well,
on that. Yeah.
I'm going to give the book, if you're a Mark Twain fan, I'm going to give it 4 stars since I can't come up with a rating right on the spot. But anyway, is there anything else you want to add here?
No, I can't think of anything. I am a Mark Twain fan. I think he's very funny, and I can't think of anything he's ever written that I didn't really enjoy. Oh, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I also read Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court.
You did read that. Do you have anything to say about that?
It's been so long, but I do remember a lot of satire in it, and it was funny. There was a lot of humor in it, and I remember because of the setting, it was like in King Arthur's day and everything. And I remember it was funny.
I would like to read The Jumping Frog of Calaveras County because it is based on an actual story he grew up listening to over and over.
I would almost say I would definitely think he's a pessimist and not an optimist, wouldn't you?
Yes, he definitely comes
off that way.
As a grumpy curmudgeon.
Yes, exactly.
So I'll give the book 4 curmudgeons.
Okay, all right, that's great. 4 curmudgeons.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that about wraps everything up. Okay, all right.
So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on
Twin Talk.